G'day everyone, my name's Cheryl Downs. I'm your host tonight for the Beyond 90 podcast, episode 57. Today we've got a couple of different guests for you. I don't know whether or not Dale will slip in later on, but we've got an old favourite in Lachy France who's joining us tonight. G'day Lachy.
G'day Cheryl, great to be on. Yeah, long time no talk.
It has been forever, and it's really good to have you back. And I love how you're pretty responsive. It doesn't take you weeks and weeks like it might take me sometimes. And we've got another special guest, which many of you would be familiar with the stuff that he's been writing because he's pretty prolific in the writing that he does. Welcome, Ben Gilby, all the way from the UK.
It's good to have you here. Thank you. Nice to be with you.
We're so thrilled that you are on school holidays and you have some time to get together and chat with us. It's been a big week in football, and I know I say that all the time, but it's been a really big week in football. Just before I progress into everything that's happened throughout the course of the week, probably just to reflect on the last podcast that we had as well. And we did get some feedback from people to say that maybe we were a bit harsh in our response to how the Matildas progressed through the Olympics, and maybe some individual players, I'm not sure, and I apologise for that. I think it's great to have diversity of thought and opinion, but we also want to make sure that we're presenting the very best positive outlook of women's football in Australia from the Matildas through to the community football that we see. So in the future, when we see anything that, diverse opinions are good, but we'll also be mindful of the boundaries that we need to take. So thank you to the people who did respond and let us know that maybe it was towards the edges of what might be okay. And we take that on board seriously. And we've got a great bunch of people who are more than happy to talk about football. So one of the really big things that happened during the week that kind of lands very softly sometimes, it wasn't sung about by Football Australia, for example, but it was around the rankings just came out for FIFA. And that's one of the reasons why we've got our first special guest on tonight in Lachy France. Now, Lachy will tell you a little bit about himself as well, if any people aren't familiar with him. But one thing I do remember very fondly of my interactions with Lachy is that, and we've probably only met really once face to face, or maybe a couple more times than that, but like a handful, was that Lachy is the go-to guy who, for anyone in Australian football to say, well, the Matildas just played a game, or any international team just played a game. Where do we sit on the rankings now? You don't need to wait for FIFA to release them. You can just say to Lachy, and I know of one former head coach of Australia who did exactly that. Welcome, Lachy France. G'day, how are you? What have you been doing since we last chatted?
G'day, Cheryl. Well, aside from, keeping my ranking spreadsheet up to date at all times, been getting out to a lot of NPL games before lockdown in New South Wales brought an abrupt end to that, which was kind of disappointing. And I've, as always, been running College Matildas, keeping an eye on all the Aussies over in the US playing in college, led by players like Amy Sayer, Tegan Micah in the past, Beatty Goad. And that's pretty much me on the football front.
You were sort of ahead of the game in setting up College Matildas, because back when you started it, and I can't remember when that was, it was a niche interest. Now it's a big pathway. It's a really interesting place.
It is. So when I started 2013 off and on, but 2014 I really got into it. I think there were about 18 players in NCAA Division 1, and this year there's 33. So wow. It's really grown. It really jumped 3 or 4 years ago. It went from 20 up to about 30, and since then it's hovered around the 30 mark, and we're up at 33 this year.
It's definitely a great product, because when you think about the US system, the players generally go through there. I mean, there's a handful that you could probably call out, Lindsay Horan being one of the first ones that I can think of, who signed a professional contract with PSG. I think it was straight away rather than going through that system. But yeah, it's a good place. But let's maybe, Ben, if you're okay to hold a little bit, we'll throw to Lachy and we'll say the Matildas were ranked as high as 4th in the world a year or a couple of years ago, and now we've dropped down to 11th. But it feels like, to me, that they're playing better football than they were when they were ranked fourth. It feels like, just in terms of what Tony Gustafsson says, it's one day better. And I think the Matildas are a lot better. I also acknowledge that around the world, there are a lot of nations who are playing much better football, and it makes it more competitive. So this segment is for you to just go on and tell us, why are we 11th now, given that we made it to the semi-finals of the Olympics, or we made it through to the bronze medal match of the Olympics? We defeated a couple of teams. Some teams didn't necessarily play. All yours. And Ben, feel free to jump in with extra questions for him as well.
Yes, please do. Any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. So, I mean, the rankings, they have their issues. Any ranking system does. And true, we were fourth at one point. You know, we came into the Olympics. Where were we ranked? We were ranked 10th. We were 9th, and we dropped to 10th after that friendly defeat to Japan. Well, the problem.
Hang on, quick question already.
Yes.
Were those official rankings, or they were Locky's calculations?
No, so
the FIFA
these were my calculate. Anything
Good.
That's not done by FIFA on the day is my rankings. But we were
Good.
9th in the official rankings before we played Japan in that pre-Olympic friendly. That was official rank. So yes, we made the bronze medal game, but we only actually won one game that counted, because the game against Great Britain didn't count to the rankings, because Great Britain aren't a FIFA nation. They're not England. They might be mostly.
Although what's interesting though is, in terms of where the groups are allocated, they kind of almost took on England's rankings. So it's kind of a bit unfair, isn't it? There.
It is. So yeah. So we don't. Any team that beat Great Britain were playing them based on a draw that comes from England's ranking, but we don't get the chance to take points or indeed lose points if you were to lose to them. So
Did you pretend? Did you pretend and use, hey, Australia played a team ranked 6th in the world?
I mean,
and what that would have done, or is that only me that looks at all those opportunities for maybe an extra point?
The gap between where we are and then it's so close to Korea, DPR, and Spain ahead of us, we would have slotted in probably back in 9th if we had if that game against Great Britain had counted.
So effectively, we blame Great Britain.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay,
But
clear. Understand.
So we only won one game that counted against New Zealand, and we lost to Sweden. We drew with the US, and that put us back up to 9th, and we stayed in 9th until we lost the bronze medal game, and that was what dropped us down to 11th. But I think what you have to consider is the Olympics are but part of the body of work. I mean, you have to look at the Olympics as as part of the overarching body of work that each team's done. I mean, if Brighton went out and beat Man City tomorrow, you wouldn't suddenly say, oh, Brighton are a better team than Man City. It's just one of those things that happened on the day. And that's why Canada aren't number 1 in the rankings now. USA still are, because they still have a body of work that's better. And the rankings, they do, by the nature of how they're calculated, weight more recent games more heavily. But it's your team's most recent game, not on a timeline. So that's why teams like Spain and Korea DPR that haven't played in a while, especially North Korea, haven't played in nearly 2 years now, I don't think. That's why they're still sitting in the same position. You can't gain or lose points if you don't play. So the teams around them will move up and down, and they'll just sit there.
And there has been some talk on one of the Facebook groups, so the Matildas and W League supporters group, where the approach from Football Australia and Tony Gustafsson to play more competitive teams to us, or higher ranked teams, has been potentially to our detriment on the scoreboard. Not on the, well, yes, on the scoreboard, but also on the rankings. However, that's where it comes in, and Ben, jump in as well. The Matildas are playing better, ranking aside. And we need to then look at, well, what are the impacts of having a lower ranking? And is there less funding? Is there less maybe commercial magnetism to say, oh, the Matildas are now ranked 11th, but they're not seeing the picture of how we're playing far tougher teams than what we've done in the past?
I mean, there of course is that. We are still second in Asia because Japan dropped below us. So Korea JPR are now the top ranked team in Asia. But as they've pulled out of the Asian Cup, Australia will still have the top seed for the upcoming Asian Cup if the rankings stay as they are.
Yep.
And of course, the rankings don't really matter to our seeding for 2023 because we're hosting and we'll automatically get a 1 seed or a top seeding for that.
Yeah, usually, just so people are aware, not everyone is necessarily aware, but the qualification path for the AFC Confederation or Asian Football Confederation is through the Asian Cup. So if Australia, and just like with this last, I think for 2019, we went through Jordan in 2018 to qualify to get through. Hopefully I'm getting all of my years right. So it can be a challenging competition. It is quite different to how they would work in UEFA as well. I mean, the tournament goes for, well, not the tournament, but the qualification goes for an awful long time versus for us, ultimately it comes down to the Asian Cup, although there's still qualification for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously for us in terms of qualifying for the World Cup, it doesn't matter, but we'd still like to have the best seeding possible for the Asian Cup as well, because if the host side takes 1 and then you've only got 2 other spots for top seeds, you don't want to fall into, getting a tough draw. And fortunately with Korea DPR pulling out, we are still the number 1 team in Asia. But I mean, going forward beyond 2023, I mean, the Olympics in Paris are only, 3 years away.
And our points will count for that. How long do the rankings points last for?
So it just keeps rolling on. There's nothing drops off. It just
they don't expire. Okay.
No. Yeah. So in the old men's system, which they've recently changed, I believe, it used to drop off every 4 years, and points would count less and less as they got further away. But because this system it weights just by its nature more recent results, nothing drops off. So it actually dates back to the first official FIFA women's game in 1971, these rankings.
Oh, goodness. I remember doing sorry, Ben, go.
Yeah, so in terms of the Asian Cup, what's the cut-off point for the rankings that are taken to decide the seedings for that?
I'm not entirely sure. I just imagine it would be the last one before the draws. The draw's done. That's usually when it is. But yeah, I'm not.
It's a good question.
100% sure, but yeah. I mean, I don't think there's enough. I don't think there'll be enough games even on that would affect us between now and then.
Yep.
But it's still not something you would, you don't want to get into a hairy situation regarding seedings.
Any other questions that we have for our rankings expert? Is there any other rankings that you saw come out aside from Australia that surprised you? I mean, maybe not mathematically, but for any other reason? I mean, you did mention Canada as well. They come out on top. And where are Canada ranked now? Are they in the top 5?
So Canada are up to 6th.
Yep.
But there's a big gap. So Canada are 6 on 2021 points. And then Brazil are on 1,978. So there's a 43-point gap, which is 43 points is also the gap between Brazil in 7th and Australia in 11th. So the top 6 have really broken away.
Is there an average number of games that the top teams play, and does that help them or hurt them, I suppose, to play more games? Because in theory, you can bank more points. In theory, doesn't mean it would happen.
It depends who you play. Like, I see people all the time complain that the US are padding their rankings by playing these friendlies against, who'd they have over? They had Jamaica, Nigeria, and was it Portugal was the other team, or Mexico?
Yeah,
I don't remember. Yeah, Mexico, sorry. Yeah. So, but playing those 3 teams in friendlies, I did a quick calculation before. If they beat all 3 of those teams and get maximum points, so a 6-0 win, anything more than 6-0 is maximum points, they would gain 1 point on their ranking.
Oh.
So it's not these friendlies that you play where you beat down on teams that are padding your ranking. You go out and get a big ranking score by winning at continental championships, which are worth 3 times a friendly, and Olympic and World Cup games are worth 4 times a friendly.
Okay.
So that's why the US crashed so hard in the rankings, is because all these losses and draws they had, they were so far ahead, and getting every time they lost points, they lost 4 times more than they would have during a friendly. So they had a 110 point gap at the top, I think, at the start of the tournament, and now it's 22.
All right. Well, what else have you got for us in terms of rankings? Anything else that's fancy?
Not really. I mean, I just want to address one gripe I have with the rankings.
Have you talked to FIFA about it already, or is it just for us? And we'll take it to FIFA.
You can take it. What? It's not really a gripe, but just something that irks me is the bronze medal match counting towards the rankings, especially for the teams that lose. And I mean, it's easy to say this now as a Matildas fan, but if you lose in the quarterfinals, that's it. You can't lose any more ranking points. Yep. But if you then go and make the semis and lose the bronze medal game, you just had 2 more big losses. And I mean, that was pretty much what dropped us so far, is that we just hemorrhaged points, losing to Sweden and the USA in those last 2 games. And that's what annoys, that's just one thing that annoys me on that front.
So you're saying that we don't have a playoff between 9th and 10th, therefore we should just both get bronze medals.
Well, not just that. I just don't think it should count towards the rankings.
Yeah. Okay.
If there's no other classification games that count towards the rankings, it just feels a little bit unfair.
What does it do for Algarve? Because does in the Algarve, do they do that kind of thing?
Yeah, they have classification games all the way through, but those count as friendlies, so there's a lot less effect.
Yeah, okay.
So Algarve, Tournament of Nations, She Believes, all those games all count as friendlies. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Now, the only other thing I think might be topical is that I'm assuming that the Matildas are going to play a match in September and or October.
Mm-hmm.
That is not me with any inside information, but I think it was something that Tony Gustafsson mentioned in his press conference. I don't know how many people have heard that. I don't think anything's been locked in apart from saying it's more than likely going to be, let's call it up north. So not down in the Southern Hemisphere, probably more around where most of the players are hanging out right now. So Ben might be one of the only people who gets to go and hang out and see that. We wouldn't be able to see it here anyway. We seem to always be in perpetual lockdown.
Oh, so let's take Norway, for example. I've got a quick calculator here. If we beat Norway on Norway's home patch, we'd immediately jump Korea, DPR, and Spain and be back in 9th position.
Yep.
That's how close it is.
That's if we beat them, because that's a big equation as well. Yeah.
If we were to beat Sweden, pretty much if we played any Northern European nation, Germany, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, we'd probably earn enough points to just jump back into 9th. That's just how close it is at the moment.
Yep. And how does it, if you can give people a bit of an insight into what does it mean if you play an away game and you win and you score when you're away, that kind of thing? Can you give some insight to people who are listening about that? And I'll pretend that I know it all, but I'm going to be listening intently.
Sure. So when you play an away game, the home team is given 100 more points on their ranking. So if you were both ranked on 1,900 points, for you playing away, you would get a score based on if you were playing a team that had 2,000 ranking points. And then higher scoring is always better. So a 2-2 draw gets both teams more points than a 0-0 draw. A 6-5 win, which is a 1-goal margin, gets the teams more points than a 1-0 win. So they're promoting attacking football, and of course, away teams do get an advantage.
Go.
So 100 points basically is equal to a team winning 66% of their time on the home patch against an equally ranked opponent. So that's why it's 100 points. It equates to the theoretical probability of a team winning on their home patch.
Just all right. Thinking, Lockie, what's the difference in terms of points between winning a qualification group game for a tournament compared to a friendly? Is there much difference?
Yeah, so an Olympic or World Cup is 4 times. So if you play the same game, same result, you would get 4 times as many points if you did it in a World Cup or an Olympics than if you did it
even in the qualifying.
In the qualifying for a World Cup or Olympics, it's 3 times. So World Cup and Olympic qualifying are 3 times multiplier, same as a continental championship. And then qualifying for continental championships is a 2 times multiplier. So as you go up the ladder, the multipliers.
So if anyone who's listening to the podcast has any questions about the ranking system, hopefully Lockie will be available you'll stalk the Matildas and W League supporters group on Facebook, or we might be able to poke him on Twitter, or poke was an old fashioned Facebook thing, wasn't it? But ping him on Twitter and we'll try and get some more answers to those questions as well. My final question just about the rankings. Have you got your ranking system backed up? Because there's an awful lot of information in there that we hope that it's saved. You know, you don't want to have a word crash, not that it's in Word, but.
I mean, everything's available on the FIFA website anyway, which is fortunate. I mean, I reset my points every time I get it from FIFA because they now drill down to decimal places, which was something that tripped me up a couple of times. So don't worry, I've got all my calculations, all my scripts, all my code saved. So there'll be no stopping anytime soon.
All right, very good. Well, thank you for that. I think we'll continue on with Lockie for a little bit longer if everyone's comfortable with that, although we're not broadcasting live tonight. Lockie, College Matildas, can you give us a bit of a wrap of where things are at the moment in terms of the college system? How many players have we got maybe in the top tier? How many of those players or the universities or colleges are actually impacted by COVID and maybe locked down a little bit, as I think, were they last season or last year?
Yeah, so last season was significantly impacted by COVID. Most teams ended up playing, instead of playing this time of year in 2020, they actually played post-Christmas. So the national championship was only decided in May instead of usually it's around the first week in December. So it's been a really quick turnaround, only 3 months, 110 days or something like that. But so this year we have 33 Aussies in NCAA Division 1, which is not sure it's the biggest number, but it'd be very close if it's not. And actually the first week of play just wrapping up today. A couple of games tomorrow with some hurricanes around. Some games have been moved, but for the most part, it's first week's just wrapping up. And of course, I think the name everyone knows in terms of college players is Amy Sayer at Stanford. So she was a starter for them all last season. Wasn't the best season for Stanford, unfortunately, but she's back there starting in the midfield, and they're looking to get back to usual Stanford ways of being in the mix for the national championship. But I think one program I just really want to point out this week, and surprisingly, it's not Alabama State. My scarf there behind me.
I wasn't sure what that was behind, but it's a good scarf. I like that one.
Yeah, it's Alabama State, delivered personally from the coach, which is very nice of him. It's UMBC, so University of Maryland of Baltimore County. They're called the Retrievers, and their head coach is an Australian, Vanessa Mann. So she played in college for Nevada, and then started coaching and has now got the head coaching job. And they actually now have 3 Aussies on the roster as well. So they have Abby Jordan from Illawarra Stingrays, and then Isabel Davey and Annalise Grove. So not to be confused with Annalee Grove, the Adelaide United goalkeeper, the Canberra United Academy defender Annalise Grove. And so they've had their struggles in recent years, but they kicked off the season with a 3-1 win. And Annalise played 90 minutes, and so did Izzy. So they both debuted and played the full 90 minutes in the win, which was very good to see. But I mean, there's plenty of players to watch. Plenty of ex-W League talent. I mean, there's Eliza Amendolia at Hawaii. She played for Wanderers. Who else is there? Renee Pountney from Newcastle Jets. She's at Creighton. And there's actually a lot of players playing at some very good schools. That's the best part, because you can go over to college, and I guess not everyone has to play at a big name school, but I think most players nowadays are getting their fit right, and that's the best part.
That's good to hear. Well, it's good to have Dale on the pod as well. Welcome, Dale, to the podcast. We've got Lachy France on my top left, and we've got Ben Gilby on my top right as well. So hopefully everyone's Dale looks very schmick there, and he looks, let me look. I think he looks vaccinated. Yep, he looks vaccinated. Very, vaccinated. Very well done there, Dale.
Thank you. Worth a day off work.
Beautiful. So that's a good update on the College Matildas, and I'm not suggesting that you go off and cover all of the English players who are playing in college as well. But Ben or Lachy, do you see some players from England, Scotland, Wales, any of that sort of realm?
Interesting you may ask that question, because I got an email the other day from a parent of a player who was at Arsenal Academy and then played for Charlton Athletic, Katie Godden. And she's actually originally from Brisbane. Now, when I checked the roster for DePaul University, her hometown was listed as Surrey. So I obviously didn't think anything of it. But apparently she's Australian. And I mean, the numbers going through from the UK outstrip the Australians massively, just from looking at rosters when I sweep them before the season.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for that overview of the College Matildas as well. I think it's probably easiest to follow them on, maybe, is it Twitter or is it Facebook, or directly on your College Matildas website?
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's all College Matildas, and then collegematildas.com as well.
Okay, cool. So we'll make sure that we add those to our show notes. The next thing, let's jump straight into a bit of a conversation about the FA WSL, where we're very, very fortunate that Ben's going to give us a little bit of a preview. Hopefully someone other than me has done a little bit of homework on the FA WSL as well. I can certainly name where the players are playing, but is it getting pretty exciting in England at the moment, Ben? And what's it like in terms of, will fans be allowed to go to the games? I'm assuming that they are. What's the landscape? Because here in Victoria and in New South Wales, all football is on hold at the moment. So we're dying to see some, and if we can see it online, then, that's something. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of last year, we had our real big lockdown pretty much from March all the way through to July last year. So yeah, we feel, and it was literally, you can't leave your house for more than half an hour a day. So yeah, we really feel your pain completely and get where you are at the moment. In terms of crowds here, yeah, I mean, for example, the men's matches, they've been having full stadiums since the season started. So that, you're getting 75,000 people at Old Trafford. The Super League games will have full crowds as far as possible. So, for example, Chelsea have got their last friendly this Friday against Aston Villa. And I think they're sort of heading for a 4-figure crowd for that, as it is for a friendly game. So, yeah, everyone's been away from Super League for probably about 16 months. apart from 1 or 2 games that we're allowed in for. So yeah, it's really building. I think the TV deal over here is a big deal as well now, because they're showing at least one live game free to air for the first time. Previously, it's sort of been hidden behind a red button, like a app thing, and there's also going out on the main on Sky, which is a big deal over here too. So in terms of visibility, it's massive now.
I would have thought it's pretty big over there anyway, but yeah, that's good info. So how do you think the season is looking at the moment? Have you seen an influx of more players coming through? Obviously, I think we had Kaya Simons come across the little bit of water to join the Super League, which is good. And then we've had someone like Hayley Raso, who was there before through Everton, but now she's moved to Man City. Is there a lot more movement, or specifically that you would call out some of the key players?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually the interesting one, that sort of the under the radar signings in terms of the English media, is Tamika Yallop, because I think her coming into West Ham is fantastic. I mean, they were all a team last year who were far better on paper than they were on the pitch. You know, because I saw quite a bit of them, and they played the players they had. They should have been pushing for top 6 easily, and I think possibly this year they can probably do that. I think Everton are the interesting one. It's unfortunate that Hayley's gone, although I understand completely why she's gone. But they've made some really big signings from the Damallsvenskan in Sweden. It looks like Hannah Benasson is going to come in this week for a 6-figure transfer fee. She's obviously 18 years old, played in the Olympics for Sweden, and you know, she's a big deal. So they've signed 3 very big name Swedish players, mostly from Rosengard, Charlie Grant's team. And yeah, I think Everton are looking for a Champions League place this year, and I think it's quite possible that they could do it.
I didn't actually give Ben a chance to do a bit of an intro for himself either. Ben's been an incredibly busy guy, and he looks after Impetus, and he also does a terrific amount of work for Beyond 90 as well. He's been helping us out with our coverage of the NPLW South Australia as well as Western Australia, and doing bits and pieces for the W League. So I don't know where Ben gets all these words from, and I don't know if they ever run out, but he's been doing a terrific job. Ben, you've got, you're not just this random guy in the UK who's writing about Australian women's football, but you have a bit of a tie in, and we can, if anyone's just listening to us, you won't be able to see in the background, but there's a couple of tops in there that look pretty familiar to some Aussie fans.
Yeah, I mean, I've got family in Western Australia, and they live about 20 minutes, half an hour up the road from where Sam Kerr grew up. So I first became aware of her about 2008 when she first signed for Perth Glory. So I saw her play a few times up until COVID. I would be coming out every other year to Perth and around the country as well. So yeah, I saw her play when she was a baby Sam at Perth Glory in sort of the early sort of 2008, 2010 time, and sort of just followed the Matildas from then. And I kind of feel that the sort of the tie I've got with them is closer than any sort of Lionesses team. So I was there on the Matildas watch party for the GB game in my green and gold, and shouting and screaming when the goal went in at the end of the game. So yeah, I'm all completely converted.
Ah, that's terrific to have another one in the books. Dale, do you have a stack of questions from Ben about the Super League and how he thinks things might play out? Is he part of the She Plays fantasy football crew? Any questions that you want, throw them to Ben.
I know that Ben and I were chatting offline, looking at doing our WSL preview in the coming days. So one thing that you mentioned previously, Ben, was like the kind of chat around Leicester coming up this year. Obviously a relatively new kind of women's program at Leicester City. Has there been much talk around them kind of in the English media?
Yeah, I mean, not so much in the mainstream media, but in terms of the sort of the women's football supporters community. I mean, they were kind of pretty much a middle of the road championship team for a few years, and then last year they went fully professional. And I think last year was quite a good year to go fully pro in the championship, because Liverpool came down and they were in all sorts of trouble, and you know, arguably they still are. So I think it was a good year for them last year to do that. they've made some really interesting signings. McManus from Manchester United being one of them off the top of my head. So yeah, I don't see Leicester being a team that are going to come up and go straight back down again. I think they'll be bottom three because it's still a massive jump. But they've made signings that they're good signings for a team coming up for their first season. They're not going to they're not going to sort of beat teams left, right, and centre. But I think they've got enough about them to beat the teams around them at the bottom, which basically is all you need to do when there's only one relegation spot.
That makes perfect sense. As you say, it's always interesting in kind of like with the teams that go up, obviously in the men's game, like they receive such a massive boost in income, and even teams that go down from the Premier League get parachute payments. So as you say, it's interesting that they've kind of been able to wrangle a few signings. There's always, as you say, has there been much chat around kind of West Ham? As you say, they were relatively disappointing last year. I know that they had issues with, for want of a word, direction in terms of coaching. Are you expecting more from them this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got a team that should really be aiming for the top half of the table. So that's sort of middle ranking 6th, 7th. I think they need to be aiming for. I think if you just look at the squad they've got, again, we're looking at it on paper, but it's so much better than your likes of Brighton and Reading and Tottenham and the teams that should be below them on the table. Yeah, so and I think if Tamika Yallop can take her form from the Olympics in, she's gonna really surprise a lot of people over here. So I don't think they realise the play that they're getting.
That's definitely good to hear. What about some of the coaching changes? I think in particular, I suppose when we look at Arsenal say, I don't have a strong allegiance with a club in the Super League. I like a lot of them, kind of like me with the W League, but Arsenal is one where we see more Matildas there or more Aussies playing there. And then we had Joe Montemurro was there as well. So how do you think that Arsenal will transition? We've seen a couple of results have come through from the Women's Champions League just recently as well. And they're doing A-OK so far.
Yeah, and I think the Champions League is the stage that they're going in at you can't really gauge that in terms of how it roads for the season. I think the big thing for them will be Steph Catley, because nobody in England has seen Steph Catley play like we know Steph Catley can play. And I think that's, she's going to be almost like a big new signing for them this year. Obviously, losing Van der Donk's a big loss, but they've got Nikita Paris in now. They've still got Miedemar. I don't know. I think you've got the same top 3 teams, but I think you need to add Everton into the mix. I think it's going to be the issue I always have with Arsenal is that they don't seem to have the strength in depth that the other top teams have. I think as soon as they start getting 2 or 3 injuries, then you get an awful lot of kids on the bench. And I think that's where if they come across Chelsea or Manchester City or Everton in that sort of period, that's where they will have their issues, I think. So yeah, I think the top 4 is at the moment it's kind of pretty much interchangeable. I think Chelsea will probably be favourites, but there's major issues with their defence, I think, still.
And what about Man United, who lost Casey Stoney, who headed off to the US? What does it look like for them? Although I don't think we have any players at Man United, but we want to know who we can beat where the Aussies are playing. Well, hopefully we can beat a team without Aussies in it.
Yeah, I mean they're in a tough spot. I mean they've finally got a manager in. I know a lot. I'm not sure how supportive of him their fan base are, because I kind of think they kind of feel that he's not of the standing of a Manchester United manager that they should have. They've lost an awful lot of players. They've started to bring some in, but not necessarily this quality, I think, with the players that they've lost. I think Lauren James leaving was an interesting one. I mean, I understand why, because her family live in Richmond, which is not too far from Kingston, where Chelsea play. But I would question how often Lauren James will play for Chelsea this year. So I think Manchester United have got not as strong a team as last season, and I I would expect Everton to be above them this year. So I think Manchester United are probably looking at 5th, maybe as would be a good finish for them, possibly.
And the point that you make about like the signings that United have had, the players that they've let go, as you say, like and I'm not saying that these are world beaters, but you've got 2 players who have gone to direct rivals, and then as you say, James might not get a run at Chelsea, but I feel like it's the same kind of situation as Rasso going to Manchester City. Like, yes, you might not get a run there, but it's the same kind of thing as you see in other leagues, where it's not necessarily the players that you can put out on the park; it's also the players that other teams can't. So it is, as you say, it's interesting that they've had players, what you would probably term lesser players, come in for as replacements, and just not being able to make those signings. But I mean, as you say, like if you don't have a manager pulling the strings until like 3 weeks until the season starts, and you can't really make any signings, like I shudder to think what training would have been like through the preseason. Like, yeah, you've got coaches there who are still going to be running the drills and stuff, but like you're not going to be able to really formulate a tactical game plan until 3 weeks before until the season starts. So I mean, it would
sounds like
I
a
would laugh
fully
very heartily if
prepared
Man
W
United
League
went
season.
down. But yeah, I would laugh very heartily if Man United went down. But like, I kind of feel for their players in a way.
When I've looked at, sorry, go.
Yeah, I think the issue as well we need to remember with Manchester United is that a lot of the consequences of last season were things not on the pitch. It's the it's the training facilities, it's everything else. From what we can gather here, the facilities were pretty well, by Super League standards, other than sort of I guess the likes of the Birmingham Pats, were absolutely dire in terms of what they would expect their Super League club to have, which was with the big reason for one of the reasons that Casey Stoney left. But, and I think if you add that plus the seeming difficulty of getting a new coach in, plus the fact of trying to run a pre-season in facilities that aren't great with no head coach as well, yeah, it's not a great sell in terms of for players coming in, is it at all?
Yeah, and there's only so much that you can kind of like. There's only so much that money will buy in a way, and Manchester United being a massive club is all well and good, but you've kind of got to remember that, like them going up year before last, I think maybe papered over the cracks a little bit in terms of the fact that they weren't really well set up in the background. So as you say, I mean, these aren't kind of things that you can just click your fingers and hope that a training ground will arrive. Like these kind of things take time, and if they're not, as you say, like sharing with the men, like a lot of other kind of more established women's teams who are involved with men's clubs are, then yeah, as you say, it's a hard sell to get players to go there from, instead of going to somewhere like Leicester where they might be sharing with the men, or somewhere like Everton, as you say, who are relatively similar placed in the table.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing with United as well is there's kind of need to remember how they came into being as well, because there's a very big pyramid system here in England, which goes, there's Super League is the top level, and you go down to tier 10. And Manchester United basically were parachuted straight into tier 2. So, I mean, even Tottenham, who ended up going up as well that season, they had a history of playing lower down the pyramids. So in terms of the organised, there is not, there's only a 4 or 5 year history of women's football organisation at Manchester United as well. So that, and I think possibly over the last sort of 12 months, we've kind of seen the consequences of that.
All right, so we're looking for hot tips of who you think will finish, maybe top 2 or top 3. I might start with Lachy because he's been quiet for a while, and I don't know how much you know the Super League, but you can just pick anyone because I'm never right anyway, so you might be the same.
It's fine. I've just listened to Dale and Ben justifiably rip on my club for the last 5 minutes. Don't worry, I'll go cry into my Leah Galton jersey after this. Well, if you want a top 2, I mean, I'm not going to go past Chelsea and Man City. I'll back them in a Quinella. I'm not going to take a particular order.
And if you had to pick a third?
I mean, if it's I mean, it has to be Arsenal, but I think there's a, it's a top two, then a third, and then the rest led by Everton. I mean, yeah, it is pretty much playing out that way. I mean, Man United, like Ben said, they're a far cry from the team that was punching with the heavyweights for the first half of last season and daring to dream of Champions League football. It's not a good place to be, but oh well.
Dale, any challenges to what Lachy is throwing out there in terms of how you think the top three might look at? And, we sound like we might have a clue of what's going to go on, but there's a lot of football to be played between now and the end of the season. So we just like to have our view.
That's the I was actually driving the other day and kind of having a think about this, about the fact that, there's only there's 12 teams in the WSL and they play each other twice. So that's only 22 games. But at the same time, teams in the WSL are guaranteed at least 26 fixtures in a season, because I think you play 22 in the league, then you play at least one in the FA Cup, and then at least 3 in the Conti Cup. So, there's as you say, there's plenty of kind of water to go under the bridge at the moment. My hot tip for the season will be Arsenal will miss the Champions League.
Ooh.
And I think I am not necessarily going to be surprised by that. I think that obviously that Van der Donk is such a big out. I think obviously Catley is, another great player that as Ben said, is that they're basically getting a free signing. But the way that they played last season, they kind of sputtered to the end of it. There were games last year where they had 14 or 15-year-olds on the bench. They had games called off because they had players with COVID. Obviously, I don't think the situation will be that dire, but I can't see them kind of going from strength to strength where they have been recently. I am also going to be really interested to see how the new Champions League goes with, obviously, you've had a different kind of form of qualification, and that will be obviously changing going forward. My hot tip for this season is I think that Spurs will go down. But I do agree that City and Chelsea will be fighting it out for the top 2.
Alrighty, and then the man who probably knows more than any of us in Ben, what are your hot tips? I'm a bit surprised by Dale thinking that Arsenal won't make it, but maybe that's me just thinking of it with beer goggles on. What about you, Ben?
Well, I'm going to start at the other end. I think it's Birmingham City to go down. They've got the big problems. They've lost an awful lot of players. Although having said that, in Scott Booth, they've brought in a fantastic head coach. From what he's done at Glasgow City, they've won 14 league championships in a row. Obviously, he hasn't done all of them, but he's done most of them. He took them to the Champions League quarter-final, which for Glasgow City was phenomenal. But yeah, I think Birmingham are considerably weaker than everybody else. I agree with Dale about Arsenal. I think I have a sneaky suspicion Everton are going to make Champions League, because I think they've got a really exciting team, and I think the first game at Kingsmeadow, Chelsea versus Everton, which I can't wait for. I think that's going to be immense. But also the week before, obviously, it's Hayley Raso against their old club as well at Goodison in front of possibly 40,000 fans as well. So that's going to be interesting debut for her. But yeah,
I just hope that they boo. I love Hayley Raso, but I just want booing. That's all I ask. You can't go and make a debut at another club without getting booed. That's not the way that it works.
They're going to boo it because it's Man City. They're going to boo the whole team.
More booing. That's all I ask for.
I think it's Chelsea's title to lose. I think that their defence hasn't got strength in depth, but it's good enough to take on the Super League teams. It's not. I don't think it's good enough in Europe against the top teams, but we'll see. But yeah, I think it's Chelsea, Man City, and yeah, I'll stick Everton in there, I think.
All right. Well, there's some tips from some guys who know what they're talking about. I think for me, Man City, Chelsea, and I would say Arsenal, but we'll see what happens with that. We probably have to wrap up pretty soon, but one of the things which I wanted to briefly touch on was W League signings, or signings more generally, and then W League signings. So it's moving along in the world. We did talk about Hayley Razzo as signed for Man City, and I think that came out shortly after our last pod. Rebecca Stott has signed for Melbourne City, which is fantastic news to see Stotty coming back from a bit of a layoff to get some treatment. Jenna McCormick has announced this week that she's going off to play in Denmark for, I'm just going to call it AGF because I don't know any other which way to say it. And then in terms of the and sorry if I've missed anyone, but then in terms of the W League signings, we're starting to see more and more of them coming through at the moment. In the lead at the moment is Perth Glory, who have signed 19 players. Melbourne Victory and Adelaide United have both signed 10 players. And then we've got Sydney on 8, Western Sydney Wanderers have got 7, the Newcastle Jets have got 6, Brisbane Roar have got 2, Melbourne City's got 1. So we're not seeing Canberra United in there at the moment with any signings whatsoever, but it's good to see a number of clubs getting some signings happening. Any other news on signings, guys?
Canberra United, I've had a email through from them this morning saying that they've got an announcement to make on Wednesday.
This is
who that
true.
is, I don't know.
It's that there's a sale at the club shop. They're selling more things. Tired of selling players, they're now just selling everything else. The whole house has got to go.
They did say player signing though.
Oh,
that's good to hear. And it might be multiple. And I think even Melbourne City actually said that they would have some signings coming through in the near term. It's probably still a couple of months away before the season kicks off. But I'm quite used to, finding out who's playing on the team sheet on game day. So if we can get more and more players announced beforehand, it just makes life a little bit easier.
And as a Perth Glory fan, I'm loving it. We've actually got half a team, or more than half a team. Like, love it.
This is a real departure from normal service to the W League. It feels like we have two extremes. We either have Sydney, who'll just announce 16 players in one go, or clubs where you don't find out until you pick up the program on the first game day.
Yeah, or you turn up to get week number 3, and someone's come back from injury who hasn't been announced, and you're like, who even is this person?
Well, we'll make sure that we update our W League squad page and get all the signings on there, make sure it's nice and easy for people to follow. I think there's plenty of other things to talk about, but honestly, I don't think we've got time. The Women's International Champions Cup has been played over the weekend with some good footage, easily watchable. So I'll share some show notes and some links to that. The Women's Cup was played as well. We saw round 1 of the Women's Champions League. There've been always matches in Nordic football that Stefan has done a great job to keep us up to date with what's happening there. And I'm just trying to see, we were going to get an update from Ben on the NPLW South Australia, but Ben, if you're okay, we might hold that off and get that happening another week. But before we finish off, the last thing that we always talk about is our Queen of the Week. Now, for Ben and for Lachy, it's probably something that you haven't been across before. But Dale, have you got a Queen of the Week this time around?
My Queen of the Week is Morgan Weaver, who, fresh from her fame of getting in a fight with somebody in a Portland Thorns game, which was quite funny. That was probably 2 or 3 months ago now. Scored the winner in the International Champions Cup for Portland against Lyon. My jokers of the week are Wendy Renard and Christiana Endler, who for some reason just don't talk to each other. If you watch that Morgan Weaver goal, I don't know if they're communicating. Not very good defending. But kudos to Morgan Weaver, and good to see Portland winning another trophy in front of their trillions of fans. And they did also just they also put up a congratulations sync banner, which is great stuff. We do love a bit of Christine Sinclair love in this podcast. So, yeah, good for them, and another trophy in Portland.
Lachy, do you have a Queen of the Week to share with us?
Well, I have a Queen of the Week and the Jokers of the Week, all from the same games. So my Queen of the Week is former Nichols State attacking midfielder Jess Coates, who went to Bulgaria to teach, linked up with NSA Sofia of the Bulgarian League, who have won, I think, 18 championships in a row, and this week made her Champions League debut.
Oh, wow.
So they got done in the first round, but came back and won in the third place playoff of their group. And my jokers of the week go to the Slovenian club who hosted that group, because there was more sand filling in the divots on the pitch than you'd find on Slovenia's Adriatic coast.
It doesn't sound very good for a football match.
It was not, but Jess came away with one win. That's something she's got in her back pocket for life. So,
very good. Ben, finally to you for your Queen and or Jokers of the Week by the sound of it, although my graphic skills probably only make it to Queen of the Week.
Queen of the Week, I haven't had a chance to watch back the NPL WSA Cup final. Yeah, that's my next job when I finish talking to you. But Queen of the Week simply has got to be Cote Rojas, because I haven't watched the SA NPLW before I started working for you guys, and it's just been an absolute joy to watch her every week for Salisbury Inter. She's a magician. She's amazing, and I hope that Adelaide United will take her on next year again, because the W League needs Cote Rojas. Joker of the week, I think Joker of the week's got to be whoever decided Glasgow City should kick off their Champions League first qualifying game at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning last week, when of course no one's going to watch it.
Oh yeah, it's a little bit harsh.
They do that in Iceland for the men's Champions League. They play games there at it's like night. They kick off games there at 9 o'clock at night in summer, but it's in like full sunlight. And it's a very good home advantage, one that obviously we don't have here. But yeah, always fun to watch a night game at 11 p.m. where the sun's only just going down.
All right. And for me, maybe Queens of the Week. I don't know if I'm behind the times a little bit, but Ivy Lewick, for her contribution to Australian women's football. She's been amazing to watch. And I remember being there at the World Cup, watching her come on for a couple of minutes, and then to live that dream in playing in the Olympics as well. So definitely to Ivy, but also, and Laura Alloway as well. I think they're amazing mates, and to sort of effectively retire from international football at the same time, I think it means something very special. And then to Jen McCormack to come back into football and hopefully breathe some fresh air into her world of football. It's always tough for a professional footballer with the high aspirations and high goals that they have, and probably it can be challenging when you don't exactly meet them and get to go off to the Olympics and so forth. So really good to see Jen back on the pitch or getting out there. So congratulations to them. Thank you guys very much for joining me on the podcast. It's been terrific to get an update on FIFA rankings, the College Matildas, the FA WSL, and I'm sorry that we didn't have more time to go through everything else. Dale, thanks for joining us as always. Ben, terrific. Great to have you, and would love to have you back as well. And Lachy, thank you very much for joining us. It's been such a long time, but hopefully we'll get you back as well again, and you can talk to us maybe in between breaks at the for College Matildas.
Love to do it.
All righty. Thank you, guys.